everyone. Welcome to Step into History. Today you are in Galveston and Houston, two of the most important cities in Texas history. The year is 1836 to 1914. If you enjoyed this journey, like the video, subscribe to Step into History, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.
If you could stand on the deck of a deep-water steamship entering the Gulf of Mexico in the late 19th century, your eyes wouldn't be searching the horizon for the glass towers of Houston. In that era, Houston was little more than a whisper in the marshes. Instead, you would be looking for the queen of the Gulf. You would be looking for Galveston. At its peak, this single barrier island was the wealthiest city in Texas. A glittering metropolis of iron-fronted banks and Victorian mansions that earned it the prestigious nickname, the Wall Street of the South. But as I began researching the old maps and ledgers of this era, I realized that Galveston's golden age was actually a high-stakes drama. It was a story of a sophisticated, wealthy island elite locked in a bitter, decades-long struggle with a muddy, relentless upstart located just 50 miles inland. Today, we are going to use modern AI to step off that steamship and into a world of silk hats, cotton bales, and global Caribbean trade. We are going to reconstruct a time when these two cities were economic twins, tied together by 50 miles of friction, water, and raw ambition. Our story begins in 1836, the year of Texas independence, when both cities were essentially just speculative lines on a surveyor's map. In this first reconstruction, we see the raw, swampy reality of Houston's birth. The Allen brothers had purchased this land for less than $10,000, and their advertisements in New York and London promised a great interior commercial emporium. But for the first settlers who arrived by boat, the reality was a desperate struggle against a prehistoric landscape. You are looking at a scattering of canvas tents and rough-hew log cabins perched precariously on the edge of Buffalo Bayou, a narrow, winding waterway that was often choked with fallen cypress timber and thick with the hum of millions of mosquitoes. In these early years, Houston was a place of black gumbo mud, so deep that wagons frequently sank to their axles, and the heavy, humid air was a constant carrier of the dreaded yellow fever. It was a town built on a swamp, sustained only by the fanatical belief that it could one day control the gateway to the Texas interior. While Houston was slogging through the bayou mud and battling the elements, Galveston was quickly becoming the center of the Texas universe. Because it sat on a natural barrier island with a rare deep-water harbor, it was the only place in the fledgling republic, and later the state, where large ocean-going vessels could safely dock and discharge cargo. By the 1850s, the Queen of the Gulf was thriving with a cosmopolitan energy that rivaled New Orleans, or even New York. As we sweep our lens across the iron-fronted banks of the Strand, notice the sheer opulence of the architecture. These buildings weren't just offices. They were cathedral-like statements of power. This street was the financial heart of the region, housing the wealthy cotton factors and insurance titans who controlled the flow of white gold. During this era, Galveston was the first city in Texas to have gas lights, the first to have a telephone, and the first to have an opera house. It was an island of luxury in a frontier state where the elite wore the latest European fashions and toasted to their success with imported champagne. By the 1880s, the port of Galveston had become a dense forest of masts and smokestacks. You would have heard a cacophony of languages on the docks: German, Czech, Spanish, and French, as ships flying the flags of the United Kingdom and the Mediterranean waited to load cotton, grain, and cattle destined for global ports. But beneath this international glamour, a resentment was simmering 50 miles inland. Every single bale of cotton grown by a Texas farmer had to pass through Galveston, and every single crate of imported medicine, tool, or luxury good coming back in had to pay a fee to the Galveston Wharf Company. This company held a private ironclad monopoly over the island's docks, and their high wharrage fees felt like an unfair tax on the labor of the entire state. Galveston's elite grew incredibly rich off these fees, building palaces like the Bishop's Palace and the Gresham House, while the merchants of Houston felt they were being held hostage by a 50-mile bottleneck.
Hello again. If you've made it this far, subscribing to Step into History really helps. Now, let's continue where we left off.
The men of Houston eventually decided they were tired of paying Galveston's tax on trade, and this is where the rivalry turns from simple competition into a feat of engineering. In our next scene, we see the shift toward industry and relentless infrastructure. Houston began marketing itself as the place where 17 railroads meet the sea, while Galveston relied on its natural, God-given deep-water harbor. Houston began the back-breaking hustle of engineering its own destiny. They spent decades lobbying the federal government and raising private funds to dredge Buffalo Bayou. They wanted to turn a narrow, muddy creek that was once barely wide enough for 2 rowboats to pass into a massive deep-water channel. It was a project that the elite of Galveston openly mocked. In the newspapers of the day, islanders dismissed it as a mud-digging pipe dream. They believed that no captain in his right mind would ever navigate 50 meters of winding, treacherous bayou just to reach a humid inland town, when they could simply dock at the sophisticated piers of the island. This rivalry reached a terrifying breaking point at the turn of the century. On September 8, 1900, the weather in Galveston was unusually sultry, and the tides were rising in a way the locals hadn't seen before. But at the time, there was no satellite tracking, and no one suspected that the deadliest natural disaster in United States history was barreling toward the Texas coast. The Great Hurricane of 1900 brought a 15-foot storm surge that swept completely across the low-lying barrier island. In this reconstruction, we see the terrifying aftermath. A wall of debris 3 stories high, composed of shattered homes, grand pianos, and the remains of a city stretching for miles along the shoreline. At least 6,000 people, perhaps as many as 12,000, perished that night. The Wall Street of the South was left in ruins, its streets filled with sand and its legendary wealth buried under the wreckage of the Goth. The people of Galveston showed incredible, almost superhuman grit in the years that followed the storm. They refused to let their city sink into the sea. They undertook one of the greatest engineering feats of the early 20th century, building a massive concrete seawall and literally raising the entire island's elevation by 17 feet. They pumped in millions of tons of sand from the Gulf floor, lifting up houses, churches, and even the Grand St. Patrick's Cathedral on jacks to create a new, safer foundation. But while the city was physically rebuilt, the confidence of the global market had shifted. Investors and cotton merchants wanted the safety of the mainland. They had seen that a city on a barrier island, no matter how grand, was always at the mercy of the unpredictable Gulf of Mexico. The 1900 storm proved to the world that Houston's inland location, once seen as its greatest weakness, was actually its greatest strategic strength. The final victory for the upstart city came in 1914. After years of dredging through the silt and political maneuvering in Washington, the Houston Ship Channel was officially opened to deep water traffic. In this scene, we see the culmination of 80 years of ambition, as the first large ocean-going steamers began to sail 50 miles inland, passing the very spots where the Allen brothers had first pitched their tents in the mud. The balance of power shifted forever. These massive vessels could now bypass the Galveston Wharf Company entirely. They could deliver their cargo directly to the massive railheads of Houston, where those 17 railroads stood ready to carry goods across the American West. The mud-digging dream had become a reality that changed the map of American commerce. and the era of Galveston's economic dominance over Texas was officially over. Today, Houston is a global titan of commerce and the energy capital of the world, and its ship channel is one of the busiest and most vital waterways on the planet. Galveston, meanwhile, has found a second life as a beautiful, resilient, and historic retreat. If you walk through the Strand Historic District today, you can still see the very same iron-fronted buildings we've reconstructed in this video. You can see the scars of the 1900 storm and the height of the seawall that saved the city. When you stand on those streets today, you are standing in the echoes of a lost empire. These two cities, only 50 miles apart, are two halves of a single Texas story. It is a story of a world built on the natural gifts of the sea, and a world built on the relentless, stubborn will to overcome it. One city was the queen, but the other was the hustler, and together they shaped the destiny of the Lone Star State.
Thank you for joining Step into History. For a brief moment, you stepped into a world that once was a city of salt, pitch, and iron-willed people who helped shape the world we live in today. These stories are more than just the past. They are echoes of how we lived, how we struggled, and how we finally broke our chains. If you want to keep exploring lost civilizations and the turning points of time, subscribe and join the journey. Where should we travel next?